Let's talk Jalen Green. I'm your host, Andrew Schlecht. With me, Sam Vecenie, the draft expert. Sam, Jalen Green, a very interesting prospect. 6'6", about 180 pounds. He played for the G League Ignite. He's 19 years old. This is just a scoring machine, a walking bucket. Probably the walking bucket of this draft. What are your just first impressions of Jalen Green?
Man, Schlecht, you brought the energy for the Jalen Green
I love
episode
him.
of this thing.
He's
man.
great.
He is super fun. I've seen Jalen Green now for, I think 3 or 4 years. And the big thing that just stands out to me is exactly what you said. He is a walking bucket. This dude can go and get his whenever he wants. He can create a shot out of nothing. Like, it's really kind of uncommon in terms of the way he can do that. I'll just kind of spoil this now. I actually have a higher grade on Jalen Green this year than what I did last year on Anthony Edwards. And that's in part due to the polish that he's going to be bringing to the table, while also maintaining not quite as much powerful athleticism. Anthony Edwards looks like a freaking NFL safety, right? 6'5" NFL safety, or even a linebacker half the time. Jalen Green isn't quite that, but he does have that kind of powerful, explosive athleticism that allows him to go up through guys as opposed to have to go around guys. So you combine that athleticism and explosiveness with some really polished skills that he's worked on, especially over the course of his time in the G League this year. And he's just a really, really impressive scoring prospect in my opinion.
Let's talk some strengths. We obviously know the scoring is a strength, but let's talk maybe on the periphery, because I think everybody knows that. He's going to be able to score at pretty much every level of the court. But what else is he good at? Just what's going to translate immediately?
So I think it might be worth just kind of going into why he is such a good scorer first. So in part, it has an explosive first step, explosive leaper, can finish at the basket, great extension to finish above the basket. On top of that, just a very creative ball handler, is very fluid getting into and out of his step back game. Is very fluid, being able to break down defenders on the perimeter and get into the lane right now. So there are just a lot of different ways that he's able to adjust and attack defenses. And then based on how defenses play him, make another adjustment, make a counter move based off of how they attack him defensively to start. So that's the biggest thing that I look at with Jalen Green. On top of that, over the course of the G League season, early on, I thought that the game looked a little bit fast for him, right? It looked like he was struggling with the speed of the game. Mm-hmm. Over the course of the G League season, and this was just over the course of a month, because if you remember, they did a bubble down in Atlanta just because the G League wasn't necessarily top of the priority list, making sure that they have a full season for the NBA this year. The game really slowed down for him over the course of just that month, right? Let alone what it's going to look like when he turns 23, 24. From the time that he was 19 years old, the game was slowing down for him at a really staggering clip. So I look at him as someone that I don't really think is going to have too many problems translating in terms of scoring the basketball and in terms of being poised in terms of the way that he handles pressure from opposing teams. Now, you asked about other strengths with Jalen Green. That's kind of the thing right now is Jalen, I think, is one of the surest bets to average 20 points a game that I've evaluated. I've been doing this for 8 years or so now. I think he's one of the surest bets to enter the draft within those last 8 years to average 20 points a game. The rest of it, I'm a little bit skeptical on, to be honest.
Yeah, what about passing? I mean, as a perimeter guy, that's become one of the more important things as NBA defenses have gotten more complex, as offenses are less centered around just one guy. What's his passing like?
Yeah, so at lower levels, I thought I don't want to throw out the word selfish because I think that would be unfair, but I do think that Jalen got a little bit one-track minded on getting his own bucket because he was so capable at that level of getting his own bucket whenever he wanted, right? Like he played on a team. I remember watching, I think it was the Adidas Championships back in maybe 2018, 2019, where he was playing on a team with Jaime Jaquez, who is a really interesting draft prospect in his own right for 2022, who is at UCLA and is going to make first team All Pac-12 next year, everything. And it was just like, Jaquez wasn't there, his teammates weren't really there. It wasn't that he was trying to get his own bucket because he didn't have talent, it was because he was just getting his own bucket because he could do it whenever he wanted. I thought the passing looked better at the G League level. I thought he played a more unselfish game. It seemed like he really took to being surrounded by veterans because that Ignite team had guys like Jarrett Jack, Amir Johnson, Dante Hall, a group of vets that have been around the NBA for a little bit of time now. But I still don't think it comes naturally to him at this point in his career. Guys improve as they get more experience, as they figure out the NBA court, the spacing, the geometry, the way that help defenders play. This is something we've seen, for instance, Zach LaVine get a lot better at over the course of his career, starting in Minnesota, then moving to Chicago. Zach LaVine has become a much more capable passer over the course of his career, even though he's not necessarily a pass-first guy, right? I think that that's the hope with Jalen Green. Right now, he loses a little bit of value, in my opinion, because of his lack of comfort, maybe making reads is the way to put it. A lot of the time, he'll just kind of settle for a shot, even though he has a guy that's open, maybe for a cross-corner kick out, maybe for a little dunk off, just because that's what he's used to doing over the course of his life.
Sure. And then the other side of the ball, defense. It, again, really matters from the wing position. And what have you seen from him as a defender?
Hit or miss, I think, is the fairest way to put it. He was better than Jonathan Kuminga this year defensively for the Ignite. Even though Kuminga is 6'7", has a 7-foot wingspan, is everything that teams look for on that end. I think that Jalen Green did a good job of shooting passing lanes. He did a good job of making an effort to try and make action plays. And for the most part, given the fact that he is, one of the 5 best players in his high school class from the time that he was, 15 years old, right? Has never really had that kind of accountability defensively that he had this year with the G League Ignite, coached by Brian Shaw, surrounded by vets. Those guys certainly, I think, held him in line a little bit. He was much more willing to make the right rotation defensively, was much more active defensively. But, look, there are brain cramps, and, I still think he doesn't get quite as much out of his athleticism on the defensive end because of his mechanics. I think that sometimes he ends up getting up a little bit high in his stance. Sometimes he closes out too heavy to shooters. He's still learning on that end because he's just never really had the level of accountability that he will have in the NBA, surrounded by elite level players all the time, playing against elite level players, and then having to play against the best competition in the world, and then also have to be accountable to his vets in the locker room if he screws something up.
Yeah, and he seems to be somebody who's at least vocalized how good he wants to be and the level he believes he should be at. And so to me, that's another good sign if you're in on Jalen Green.
Yeah, totally. So I think he's a guy that is going to improve defensively over the course of his career. Again, Devin Booker, when he entered the NBA, was terrible defensively.
Yeah.
Devin Booker right now is in the NBA Finals, and part of the reason that the Phoenix Suns are in the NBA Finals, it's a small reason, but it's because Devin Booker is no longer a drastic defensive liability like he was early in his career.
Yep. Let's talk range. Where is he going to go in this draft? Everybody talks about this being a 5, maybe 6-player draft. Where is he within that group?
So I think of it more as a 4-person draft, personally. There are 2 players in Scotty Barnes and Jonathan Kuminga that I like more than the rest of the draft. But I have 4 guys right now in my first tier of prospects, and Jalen Green is one of those guys. I personally have Jalen Green at number 4 on my board. I think he has a case for anywhere 2 through 4, depending on what the team that is drafting is looking for and what they need at the end of the day. Not quite as complete a game as we've kind of discussed over the course of this video, but just such an explosive scorer and has the kind of explosive athleticism that, even guys like Jalen Suggs, Evan Mobley, Cade Cunningham, they just don't have those absolute ridiculous explosive tools that Jalen Green has at the end of the day. Look, I'm not the only person that's reported that the Detroit Pistons definitely really like Jalen Green. I don't think he would go number 1. I think that if the Pistons really decided that they were going to take Jalen Green and they were set on him as the number 1 player in this class, I think they would trade down potentially to somewhere like number 2. The Houston Rockets have one of their first round picks, for instance. So if they could maybe, get that first round pick back, and then Houston could move up, maybe take a Cade Cunningham, they could slide down to 2, take Jalen Green. I think that Jalen Green's range at the end of the day is going to start at number 2, even if Detroit, potentially looks at him as the best player in the draft, which I'm skeptical on, but I think is a real possibility at the end of the day. Number 3 and number 4, I would be surprised to see Jalen Green fall to number 5 in this draft. So anywhere 2 through 4, based on the feedback that I've gotten, I think is what we can expect in terms of where Jalen Green is going to be selected.
Yeah, and I love the fit with the Raptors in particular, because they have all the role players ready. They're already set, and they need just a go-to scorer. And now it may take a minute for him to become that at the NBA level, but if they can be patient with him in a couple years, they may have a team that's not too far off from what they had a few years ago.
Well, it's funny, to take people behind the curtain. We're recording videos for all of the top prospects, right? And all of the top prospects could potentially end up in Toronto. Except for Cade Cunningham, let's say, right? Unless Toronto moved up to number 1 by moving all of its assets. Toronto is such a good developmental situation that the best fit for all of these guys among teams in the top 4 is probably Toronto at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But in terms of where he fits roster-wise, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think Toronto needs one of those game-breaker guards, right? Or game-breaker perimeter players. Fred VanVleet is a really great player. I really like Gary Trent Jr. as well, who they acquired at the trade deadline. But I like those guys, I like Gary Trent as a 5th starter. I like Fred VanVleet as the 3rd starter. I think that team more than anything needs just the guy, right? And you could say the same thing for Houston as well. Like Houston at number 2, I don't think they really have anyone that is guaranteed to be the guy on that team long term, or is guaranteed to be on that team in 2 years period, right? Yeah. So I think Jalen Green obviously makes an incredible amount of sense there as well at the end of the day.